guys, it's Erin and school is out and I am back to a more regular video schedule or something. Anyway, I thought to kind of get started and get back into the swing of things, I would share some of the books that I read since my last update that I really enjoyed. Just for some stats, so I just finished my second semester of my PhD program. I have quite a while to go, but this year was definitely like a tough one and I'm glad to be done. I also really enjoyed it, so it's not like I was like good riddance or anything, but it's nice to have a little bit more free time to do my own kind of reading. And for context, I counted the books that I have read since the 1st of February, and of the books that I read, 8 of them were for fun, and 21 of them were for school, and that's just the number of complete books that I read. I read a lot of chapters, a lot of like half a book. I had a short story anthology that I like didn't quite finish because we weren't assigned all the stories and stuff like that. So I definitely read like way more pages, probably twice as many pages as 21 books for school, but that's how many complete books I read. So of those 8 books, most of them were kind of just for fun. They were fluffy like romances or whatever. And I tend not to engage with those a whole lot because I'm reading them purely for entertainment. A lot of them aren't actually that great. And I really only talk about the ones that I really like. So the first book I talk about is one of those that I read for fun that I just thought was worth a little mention. It's called Soulless by Gail Carriger, and this was just a really fun kind of like romance, mystery, historical, paranormal book. It's got a lot going on. And I've read a number of these just like over the years because I like all of those things and it's fun to see how they get mashed together, and I thought this one was done pretty well. It's, like I said, not great literature, but it's just a super fun, entertaining book. The main character, whose name I cannot remember, is keeping a secret. She is not only the spinster daughter of an Italian man who passed away when she was a baby, and an English woman who has since remarried, and they live like upper crust Victorian society. She's a spinster and kind of like the odd one in this community. She's also soulless, which means that when she's touching one of the other supernatural beings that exist in this world, they become human again. So the world also has vampires and werewolves living in it, and so it's like Victorian London plus vampires and werewolves. It's very interesting. I'd say it's probably late Victorian period. It's not super clear, but usually Victorian is actually like 1870s, even though the Victorian era started in the 1830s. Friendly reminder. There's a lot going on there. Anyway, that's a tangent. So this young woman accidentally kills a vampire who attacked her. It was like within reason, but she was trying to just like defend herself and get away, and then she killed him, and that brings the person in charge of the like supernatural crime unit in to talk to her, and she's very annoyed because they have crossed paths before, and she is not a fan of this gentleman who is a werewolf. His name is Lord Macron. For some reason I remember his name and not hers. And it's the beginning of a mystery, and of course this is like, you can see it coming from 7 million miles away, but they hate each other, so they're gonna fall in love, probably. I thought that the story was well written, it was entertaining, it wasn't doing anything crazy, but there like also weren't any plot holes. The world was really well realized. I was interested in the way that the author kind of like integrated the vampires and the werewolves and their own sort of societies and ways of doing things into the kind of Victorian world. I thought that was really interesting. If I have any complaints, they're about the end, so I'm gonna be really vague, but basically I found the sort of like big reveal to be almost too big. Like the way the story was ramping up, it kind of like, I felt like it was ramping up and there was a little bit of a skip upwards. It wasn't quite a clean ramp, but hey, it's the first book in a series. Whatever, I enjoyed it. Also, this is the thing I might start doing a little bit more because I know some people are interested, and some of my followers are interested in the content of books like these, especially the like romantic content. So this is a little spoilery. If you don't really care, just like skip forward or mute or something until the cover is off the screen. But if you're wondering about the kind of like level of romantic content, there are are quite a few enthusiastic kisses, and there is one encounter that goes beyond enthusiastic kissing, but it is between a married couple, and also it's literally the like last 2 pages of the epilogue. So if you want to read the story but you don't want to read that, you can literally, like, you see it coming from a million miles away, just stop reading. It's easy. So actually, like, as far as that goes, if you're looking for a story like this is like really great. Also, if I look distracted, it's because a spider has been climbing across my wall. It's making me a little nervous. Spiders are great. I love spiders, but sometimes they bite. I also have 3 classics that I read this semester that don't get a ton of attention or mentions. They're sort of like deep cuts classics, which is what you often read in graduate school. And so I thought I'd just give them quick mentions and reviews here, and then I'm going to share with you the classic that I'll be reading and reviewing by the end of the month. So the first one, just because it's on the top of my pile, is Virginia Woolf's Between the Acts. This is her last her last novel. She actually died while she was revising it, and her husband kind of like gave it a quick spit shine. Not that it needed it. She was a very meticulous writer, and had it published. And this is set in one day in June of 1939, and so one of the major kind of like underlying themes is this kind of like it's the like last idyllic time before World War II starts. And it's basically about a couple, the Olivers. They are on this estate that's owned by his father, and every year the community puts on a theatrical performance. It's like a community theater performance, and so we get a lot of the theater, which is sort of related to the theme of the book, or the themes of the book, and then that's where the title comes from. And then we also get the kind of like build up to the storm that is going to come about that this couple has to have about their marriage. It's very Virginia Woolf. It's kind of a smaller novel than like To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway. I felt like if you've never read Virginia Woolf before, you might not want to start with this one. Not for any particular reason, like it's not bad. It's just not quite as meticulously polished and like perfect as To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway. I'd actually recommend starting with Mrs. Dalloway, and if you like that one, read this one, and then read To the Lighthouse, which has like just a lot of people in it, and it can get kind of confusing, so there's that. Anyway, Virginia Woolf, I think, is fantastic. Her writing style is really beautiful, but if you're not familiar with it, it takes a little getting used to, because she's sort of almost like, her narrator is kind of like a camera narrator. So she'll follow one person and we get their thoughts, and she kind of will like pan and switch into someone's head, sometimes even just for a sentence. So you really have to be paying attention to know like whose point of view you're observing at any particular moment. But it's a beautiful style, and I really love it. The next book is Herman Melville's Pierre, or The Ambiguities. So nowadays, Melville is known for Moby Dick, which is a very long book. It is a very good book. I really like it. There's a lot about whales, though. And the plot kind of disappears in the middle intentionally. It's not like he didn't know how to plot things. But this is kind of a spoof on Gothic literature, except it's like a cynical, bitter spoof, not a like Northanger Abbey spoof. So if you want something dark and spoofy, try this. Pierre Glendinning is the main character. He lives this incredibly idyllic life in on the family estate in New York City, or not in New York City, in New York. And he's 19. He's in love with this girl who is, of course, beautiful and blonde and named Lucy. And Melville is doing that on purpose. It's part of the kind of like satire, right? Because all of the beautiful girls in Gothic novels are usually blonde, and Lucy is a pretty common name for them, so he's doing it on purpose. So Pierre also has kind of a weird relationship with his mother. They're like overly familiar. They call each other brother and sister. His mom really isn't a very nice person either. Definitely the sort of like domineering matriarch of the family. Pierre is just like fine to go on long walks in the woods, so he's got this like very romantic sensibility. He writes bad poetry, stuff like that. And then Pierre gets a message from this woman. Her name is Isabel, and she is the dark kind of like femme fatale figure, but not really. And she says she has something to talk to him about. So he goes and meets her really late at the farmhouse where she's been living, and she tells him the story. And this happens pretty early in the book, so it's not really a spoiler. But according to Isabel, her father is Pierre's father, who had an affair with her mother before Pierre's father was married. So it's not an extramarital affair, but still in 1853, having a child out of wedlock was not exactly a good thing. So Pierre is in agony over this, and also weirdly attracted to Isabel, and so he thinks through what his options are because he wants to help Isabel, also not destroy his father's reputation. So his solution is that he's just gonna marry Isabel, but only like marry, and move with her to New York, and like consequences be damned, which is such a great idea, right? And the story kind of goes from there. So that gives you an idea of kind of the like weirdness of the story. I thought it was really well written. I thought it was really compelling. I had lots of words for Pierre, but you're supposed to hate him, so it's fine. If you want that kind of like anti-hero, like, what are you doing with your life sort of book, maybe check this one out. I kind of want to recommend it to people who like If We Were Villains or The Secret History. Like, it doesn't have similar vibes, like narratively necessarily. There's no murder. Actually, there's a murder. Just kidding. There's a murder in the story, but it has that same like all of the characters are terrible. Everybody, you're like constantly, what are you doing? I don't understand. It's great. The last book is the Life and Adventures of a Haunted Convict by Austen Reed. This is actually a memoir, and the story about how it came to be printed like this is kind of cool. It was a manuscript that was written by Austen Reed, and Austen Reed is a black man who was born in the kind of like mid, I can't remember, 1820s maybe, in New York. Not a slave, was never a slave his whole life, but it's about his experience as a northern black man during this time when like slavery was kind of the focus, as it should have been, but his experience isn't great either. His father dies when he's young. He starts to get into trouble. He ends up in the first juvenile detention center in the country, and then kind of starts a prison cycle. He is released, he's back, he's released, he's back, he's released, he's back. He does finally get released, and then lives the last 40 years of his life pretty low-key. Apparently, he, at least according to records, like he never got arrested again after that, but talks about some of the his experience in the incarceration system, which was just starting to kind of become what we know it today as, and definitely had some really negative experiences. It's not like the most brilliantly written narrative ever, and it would definitely be helpful to, although it is like, it's actually pretty good. It is a little fictionalized. Sometimes the timeline is kind of hard to follow, which is fine. The extra materials in this book are really, really helpful, and I highly recommend reading the introduction first. It also tells you how the manuscript got discovered and authenticated, and obviously the scholars who authenticated it were like, wow, this is really important, we need to read it, or we need to like make it available to be read, and so now it's published. In addition to sharing the experiences of a black man in the North during this time, we also get the experience of a lot of lower class white people who were also discriminated against and treated with racism because people are weird, Irish, Italians especially. And so just kind of generally, it provides this really interesting glimpse into the life of a social class of people in the early 1800s that you don't get to see in a lot of literature that's written during this time, and you don't even necessarily get to see in a lot of the like slave narratives and stuff that are also written during this time. So it's a really helpful addition, just like historically, to add to our understanding of the way that life was in America during this time. So I highly recommend this one. It is only available in this edition, but you can buy it used for pretty cheap. You'll probably have to get it online. This is the book that I will be starting when I stop reading or filming this video. I got it from the library, as one does. This is Wilkie Collins's The Woman in White. So my classics reading, not for school, has just like disappeared. As you know, it does. Because I was just reading so many classics that were assigned. I didn't really have the like room in my reading life to read one that wasn't. But I am back to my like reading lists and reading goals and stuff, and I'll do a kind of like update on all of that soon. But the first one that I'm starting with for the Classics Club is The Woman in White. Because I'm reading this for the Classics Club, I will do a full single video review of it when I am finished reading it. I'll also be doing one or two others soon for a couple of books that were on lists that I ended up reading during the semester as assigned readings, and I have a bunch of other stuff coming up soon too. So this is a kind of like mystery story, and I don't really know a whole lot else about it. It's the first English sensation novel according to the back, and it is a gripping tale of murder, intrigue, madness, and mistaken identity. A psychological thriller that has never been out of print in the 140 years since its publication. Anyway, I read The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, which is similar, I think just a little later, and really enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to reading The Woman in White. So that is it. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments, any books that you are interested in hearing more about. Also, have you read anything recently that just really got you excited, even if it's for school? Sometimes we read school books and we're like, yes, this is great. That's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you hopefully very soon in my next video. Bye!